Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Let's see here. Hello, everyone. Let me get everything set up here. There we go. All right. Appreciate everybody being here tonight. And for those that will be watching the show as we through the week, been on the road, just got back from my travels. I want to thank everybody being here. Tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit about the interviews and comparing them to some of the confessions that were made while Richard Allen was in jail, of course. And we're just going to be looking at that a little bit. And from my viewpoint of a question I've always had that I had mentioned in a lot of my shows regarding that when this offender was identified, and this, of course, Richard Allen has been convicted of the offense, would be that is when that offender, being Richard Allen, on those trails, would he carry a firearm? And was it his normal daily activities to be armed? For the fact that that offender normally did not carry a firearm, and on that particular day he did, then we have intent, a premeditation of something that's going to happen. And we gather some of that information from this interview. And so through that interview and comparing it to some of the things that Richard Allen told Holman during that interview, and some of the techniques that were used, we'll discuss that. And of course, if you have any questions in chat, throw them in there. Be mindful while you're in chat to be respectful of others, families, and mods. But like I said, I appreciate everybody being here. And had a long, see, I was on the road probably about 10 days. Went all the way up to Iowa, came back, did some work in the Midwest with several families, and picked up another case. Been working on it for the last, I guess, 5 days. But everything's moving forward. Got some other cases that we're working on. Foundation's doing some work. We're assisting other families with some funding regarding some other searches and things. So a lot's going on with the foundation. And as we look at what we're going to do this year, moving forward, we absolutely appreciate everybody's attention and their support of this channel, because it means a lot to us. And without that support, we couldn't do what we do with this. But like I said, let's get into this. And if you have any questions, throw in there, because I know everyone has watched. There's a lot of channels out there that have covered the interviews of with Holman, with Richard Allen, and there's a lot of interactions, even interactions of when law enforcement brings in Richard's wife, and they allow them to have interactions within the interview room, and they're all strategies, guys. When law enforcement sets up an interview, it's all for one purpose. They're there to gather information. Now, does law enforcement absolutely expect a confession every time? No. But we can still gather information that can be used in the trial process. And was that accomplished? Yes. There's a lot of different ways different officers interview. It's just like personalities. Everyone has one. And of course, you have certain training, and there's all different types of interview processes and different theories. And you'll see some officers that are very combative, and you'll see some officers that are just even keel. Doesn't matter what's going on, doesn't matter how heated the exchange from one party gets towards law enforcement, they're very even keel. But then you'll see some that react, and is it a strategy? Is it a ploy? Is it just, you know, or do they lose control? I watched that interview, and law enforcement at the end of the day knows that every interview and every interaction that they have with a suspect, no matter what the charges will be, that interview has the potential of getting in front of a jury. And that jury is made up from that community. And so, and you're representative of law enforcement. So, some people are extremely professional. They don't go in and don't throw out a lot of curse words, and are not combative. And for the fact that if you offend, um, even through some type of moral standards of what law enforcement is, while you're interviewing a suspect, someone on that jury may take offense with that. And so you don't want to, for that to see, there's a lot of different techniques, and not faulting Holman for the way that he did. He did what he thought was right. And watching that interview from the get-go, early on, I mean, he played the logic, did everything early on that, as far as setting out the stage of what law enforcement knew about that crime scene, about what they had that was incriminating to Richard Allen, and trying to build this foundation and this wall surrounding Richard Allen, that there was no escape of the evidence pointing to him, that in any direction that he turned, that there would be a certain amount of evidence that he would have to face, and there was no getting away from that evidence. And early on, I think it was a great interview. As it progressed, and I have to say this about Richard Allen's composure, it was very impressive. And his composure was probably a little bit better than what law enforcement was. And I call it like I see it, as far as that. Even towards the last part where, there was the profanity and there was a heated exchange after Richard Allen spoke to his wife, and he was in that fight or flight situation. His wife had been in the room, was that from being embarrassed, and he didn't want law enforcement to make certain accusations to get her reaction, or was he fearful that she might blurt out something that he didn't wish for law enforcement to know? There's a lot of things. I wish they had kept her in there a little bit longer, but like I said, everybody does things their own way. But before we get much further into it, let's go in the chat, see who's here, and say hello to a few people. And like I said, I appreciate everybody being here. Hello, Paula. Hello, Necessary Evil. Good to see you. There's Miranda. And before we go too far, Miranda, yes, I had sat down and talked to Drew regarding the Evansdale case, and getting ready for this year's work. And hello, Madison. Good to see you as always. What's going on, Necessary Evil? You and Miranda. Oh, hello, but thank you for sharing on Facebook. Hello, Mustang 65. GP, good to see you. BGOG is here. Miranda says, it's too bad you didn't tell me you were coming up to the Midwest. I said I was going into the Midwest. I just wasn't on that side of the state. I had a lot of work to do. Met with law enforcement regarding with a sheriff regarding one of our cases, and trying to get that case, all the information to them so that they can proceed with an investigation. Appears that will be the case, so I'm very pleased with that. But I wasn't over there on the Chicago side of the Midwest. Hello, Lynn. Good to see you. Sammy Day says Richard Allen's wife was very reluctant to show support for her husband when she entered the interview room. RA kept trying to get her to say she knew he couldn't be an offender. She never acknowledged that. And yes, that was something that stood out, that he kept reinforcing that issue that I'm not capable of that. That is a good point, and it's something that, of course, law enforcement, um, you know, that part of their strategy, of course, is putting them together to have what we saw. We saw that surprise that you never told me that you were on that bridge, which was, while the other officers may have had that, they wanted to, they put and created that scenario and that event to see the reaction of Richard Allen. And there was a time or two that Richard started to go down a path, and he stopped himself from talking because he knew those cameras were rolling, and what effect would it have had, and what details did he hold back. Like I said, if I had to score that interview for the first part, all the way up until the the yelling and the by law enforcement, it was probably an 8 out of 10 on interviews. There's certain things that he could have probably hammered home a little bit more about the putting Richard Allen in certain things and certain scenarios of understanding that and reversing the roles. But now, once it got to the shouting match and the cussing, that put it down there. I probably give the whole. And like I said, this is in hindsight. When you're in the throes of that type of conducting interviews, there's a lot going on. Of course, you have your whole strategy in mind. The trying to bond, creating a certain avenue of how you want to approach the subject, putting the details out there so that they clearly understand this vast uphill mountain of evidence that there will be thrown to them and to a jury, and for their conviction. And of course, like I said, everybody hopes for those Perry Mason moments when they said, "Oh, I done it. This is how I did it." But you're also in interviewing someone, and a lot of people may not know when you're interviewing, and I'm pretty sure almost all of society at some point or another has crossed paths with pathological, sociopaths, and that type of demeanor and that type of individual. And while they seem they're able to communicate and control, that they fear and they think different than we do. Their thought process is totally different from us. The only thing they probably really fear is being caught eventually. And other than that, they face things different than we do. And for the fact that any type of psychopath that would take the lives of two innocent children is an animal. And so what you could throw at them is not going to shock their system. They know everything about that crime scene, and they can pick up on the details that you may be throwing out there, and they know what's at that crime scene. And was Richard Allen, when the bullet being thrown up there, was he really believing that they had that bullet? Or was he just putting up a wall that no, there's no bullet there. I don't care what that report says. I don't believe you. I don't believe the pictures. I don't believe anything. Was he in that mindset of just denial, denial, denial? And, because even at one point he says, arrest me. So, but anyway, yeah, necessary evil. A confession does get a deal of saving a lot of money um, and on trials. And one of the things that we have to look at with Richard Allen is that he says, I will not confess to something I did not do. But within months of that statement, in an environment that was not part of an interview, he contacts the very people in his life that are most important to him and confesses to them. Um, and, was Richard Allen justifying that I will not confess to you, law enforcement, what I did, but there's a different angle and a different, because like I said, they think in different levels than we, that I won't confess to law enforcement, but I will at some point and confess and tell my wife and my mother exactly what I did. And so that happens because I've been in interview rooms, whereas I might be the lead interviewer, but I see a connection made with um, another officer, male or female. Now, do I think that they probably should have brought see what his interaction would have been with a female? Possible. Because, like I said, everybody has different techniques and different ways and trying to see and trying to build some type of rapport with these individuals. But they're different animals out there. Paula says he definitely had an attitude. Yeah, they both had an attitude. But like I said, I was surprised by watching um, um, Richard Allen. And one of the things, like I said, we had what we have to consider, of course, is that only 3 people from this moment on know what happened up until their lives were taken, 2 of these lives. So there's only one individual of this group that knows all the details. And that one individual, of course, which has been identified as Bridge Guys, Richard Allen. Um, and of course, you have the other side that he is wrongly convicted. But do I think that's the case? Personally, I don't. But I still, um, uh, I have certain respect for those who are fighting for the cause. I don't hold any um, um, type of anger towards those people because everybody has a point of believing what they wish and base it upon what facts they wish. So I won't ever, we should all respect each other's opinions, regardless of which way they are, because, while we may agree with those 12 jurors, others don't. And so I'm just not one of those that are confrontational as far as that. I'll stand on what the evidence showed, what the evidence says, what Holman put to him in that encounter in that interview room. And it turns out that while Holman said we have other evidence, he pretty much laid everything out. I mean, they had everything from the bullet, to his confessions, or not his confessions, but his prior interviews of being on the bridge with the clothing, even the statement about when they were doing the search, it's over. Some of those things. A necessary evil says, "Oh, I've been through an interrogation. I'm pretty ticked off." Same here. Um, I was in law enforcement, but still, even in law enforcement, there are certain times you'll have encounters, and other agencies that come in and investigate. I've been part of those investigations. I've been interrogated numerous times by the FBI. Had my rights read to me by the FBI. and went through that path of interrogation. Um, and I've been yelled at too, uh, but it's just part of it. When people accuse you of certain acts, and just because you're accused of something, don't mean you're guilty of it. It's only when a jury finds you guilty that you have to worry about that issue. Gamblets, Gambias, good to see you. Copper Horse, necessarily says the way he answered her when she called him out. Yeah, it's like I said, there was a time or two he got flustered there for a moment, and I was hoping for more, but he gained control and went elsewhere. Johnny R. Kramer, the music movie channel. I agree, Mr. True Crime. Thank you. Good to see you. No problem. Again, it was like a carnival in that room. There at the end, it was. But like I said, uh, the first part of it, I can't argue with. Uh, Getting on back into the emotional part, and when we start yelling, and I know there's people that say, well, law enforcement's trained to escalate with and everything. Um, and uh, that may be the way they train them now, but that wasn't the way they trained us back in the day. Because we know what the answers, when you go into that interview room, you pretty well know everything about that crime scene. Now, they may tell you a few things that surprised you, and I've been surprised when I've spoken to people that have committed absolutely the most horrible crimes you can imagine, homicides or otherwise, of why they do certain things. And in their own mind, it makes sense. But some of these people that are truly evil, it means nothing to them. It's kind of funny or humorous to them, and and how they'll approach and give you certain details that, oh, that wasn't the terrible thing about it. The terrible thing was something totally off the wall, or so there's things that can surprise you about the crime scene, but you should have a pretty good grasp of exactly what went on that crime scene. Now, do I know of how much at that time was known by law enforcement? No. Miranda. Yeah, well, that case is being investigated right now. Miranda, everything won't be until it'll probably be several weeks before anything can be disclosed about that. Hello, Ava. Good to see you. Paula says, I was not a huge fan of either guy during the shouting match now. Um, Especially, like I said, this is going to be shown in front of a jury. Now, while you may want to pressure that, and that's the thing. If you're truly composed and you know how to push people's buttons, you want that offender to show you the animal that those two young children faced. You want them to see his anger, his inability to maintain composure. You want them, the jury, to see that face of evil that these two children saw, and see what it's like. Now, um, we saw while he was defending his wife and about his family, we get a glimpse of what he truly could be, um, um, as far as the type of animal he could be. But it's just a small glimpse, and it's in defense of his family. If you can push the buttons, whereas it's not, and it's just that he's attacking you as an individual, as law enforcement, as or the evidence, and he loses control, and you push those buttons, that's what ultimately you're fighting, and that's your goal, because you want that jury to see him in his worst face. Was that accomplished? No, I don't believe so. Um, Madison says, I wish Holman or Rich Allen's wife would have pushed him more on the keepsake box more. I would like to hear Richard Allen's explanation for that. Um, yeah. Also, there was we got to see Richard Allen say, I don't know, I don't even know if you could count that high. How many times, I don't know, of about how that bullet could have got there. He knows exactly how it got there. And why that he knows everything about that house, his residence, what was taken, why it was taken, where he parked his car. There's a lot of things about the whole setup of that could be, can you question everything that law enforcement does? In hindsight, it's easy to do that. You know, uh, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking is easy for everybody, but when you're in the throes of the moment and the emotional roller coaster ride, because it can be a roller coaster ride in there, and because as a law enforcement officer, you do know what was taken from the community, and you know how dangerous an individual you're dealing with, and you know the responsibility of your job. It's not something that you just shrug off and say, well, I did my best. You're, there's a lot of responsibility to do for law enforcement to try to get the answers for that jury, because that's what it's all the case is for. You as a law enforcement officer, you're not going to be able, you're not the final judge of what's going to happen to this individual, but you are in charge of gathering evidence and presenting it in a manner that the jury can. Uh, Necessary evil. They should have questioned him more with Kathy, though. He seemed like he was caving to her. Yes, and I agree with this for the fact that there was a moment there, and whereas Richard Allen was in control when, and I don't know if uh, Holman misread it or he was trying to protect Kathy also. But if someone I was interviewing, whatever they want, I'm going to do the opposite. I would keep her in there and and do exactly what they did without her in there. Go through the evidence from the beginning to end, and rather than tell Richard Allen what's going to happen and that you're going to be dragging your wife and kid through it. Let's put them in the room. And I mean, he's not, under arrest. He's not in custody during some of these interviews, but bring him in there, lay it out that this is what he's facing. And because ultimately he did confess to his wife while he's in jail now. Um, and but let's put it out there and let's see that would that have been the driving force that, oh, I don't want you to hear all the evidence of what went on, what occurred to these children, how it was done, all the scientific evidence, the video, the voice, everything that was presented to Richard Allen. I think that as necessary um, says here that I would have liked to seen a whole new presentation, because Richard Allen already knew everything that Holman had given to him about what was in it. He knew what this vast wall was on the trails, what he stated to law enforcement down the hill, and have all that set up. And let's do this again, and let's see if we can't make him say, no, stop. I don't want her to hear the rest of this. You got me, or whatever. Not saying that he would have, but I most certainly would have enjoyed, or would have not enjoy is probably not the best word, but I would expect that that could have had a huge impact and may have been the turning, might have turned him. Uh, Johnny Kramer says that I thought Richard was going to say impossible. I didn't have my gun that day. I had my knives. That's what stumped him. He was like, they was offered my knives. They um, almost had him rattled. And true that uh, when all the times when he was discussing that, I don't know how that bullet got there. He may not know. Like I said, he may not know how that bullet got there. He may have forgot that. I mean, that bullet could have got out there through a struggle, could have been dropped, it could have been, it doesn't mean that it was racked at that time. It could have been racked somewhere earlier and he put it in his pocket or something. I don't know. There's nothing says that at the crime scene that it had to be racked there. The bullet was found there, but it still doesn't mean it has to be racked there, although it could have been racked there again, because as we see here, he mentions, and I was wondering about that. That was the biggest thing, is that the only time he says he carried that firearm was during fishing, mushroom hunting, and that when pushed, he stated that he carried it because out in the boondocks, you don't know who you're going to run into. And I don't think any truer words could be said. And that he carried it for personal protection, but he didn't carry it on the trails. He only carried it in limited, and he didn't have it with him that day. And like I said in my other shows prior, I've always questioned that if this wasn't a offender's normal carry, like some people, they carry a firearm all the time. I'm one of those persons. I've lived my whole life uh, with the idea that a firearm will give me a chance to protect my family and myself in the worst type of situation, and I believe in that. And so, whereas I carry one constantly, Richard Allen says that he does not. The only time he never carried it on that trail, and so this answers the question I had brought up before, that if this offender carried this gun, and he normally doesn't do this, he took it that day with the intent, premeditation, that he was going to do some type of abduction and control, and he needed a firearm, regardless of who that individual would have been. Would it have been one of the other witnesses, or whoever he crossed on that trail that day? And was it just, unfortunately, it was Abby and Libby that encountered him, and he was able to gain control of them with that. And as far as it just being a crime of opportunity for them, very possible. Miranda says, do you think the read technique is ethical? Yeah, read technique, there's a lot of things about that. There's a lot of different techniques, read being one of them. There's, yeah, everything, anything, it doesn't matter. Any type of technique can be abused, just like any rule of law can be abused. There's nothing that can't be abused, but there's also certain parts of it that are good. And so it's how you use them. It just, we think about everything that's in our daily lives, that if certain things occur, it's fine. But can it be abused by those overzealous? Absolutely. Let's see here. Gambler says that he lacked emotion. It was very telling to me. Um, yeah, I mean, different people have a lot of different types of emotion, and it's hard to read emotion, but that's fair enough. Skater 8, good to see you. True Crime Web, did you see the new attorneys for Jeremy Miller? Is Allen's old defense team. Miller charged with 24 felony counts of child molestation. No, I hadn't. Uh, Necessary. So I personally believe they had enough to identify him in 2017, tip or not. Um, yes, everything that they had in 2017, they of course had uh, in 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22, 23. Everything they had from the get-go, they had him. He just slipped through those cracks early on. What do you think of his lack of emotion when seeing poor Libby's leg when shown the bullet? I doubt that he um, even, is this type of individual. He saw that real time. He was convicted of the crime. He's seen it before. There's nothing at the scene that would shock him. And so, you know, um, and he probably never even thought about that. Oh, he should have, you know, uh, although that only showed a foot and a part of it. And of course, uh, from the earlier released images, of course, I had seen that part of her. Um, but but it's nothing that he hadn't seen before, and I wish, you know, that um, there's a lot of ways, like I said, that those photos could have been used in a manner to use as leverage if Richard Allen's wife had been in there at the time. Necessary Holman lost his cool. Yes, I agree. I believe so. Johnny Kramer says, so much true crime, sir. There's rumors case is closed. Are we there yet, sir? Or should it be closed but still work? No, it's closed. I mean, he got a conviction. The state, of course, uh, the most confusing thing from Doug Carter was tentacles. Is there a possibility, because even in this interview process, um, it's brought up by Holman that we don't know who else was there or what's going on. Are there others that are implicated? Um, what are those tentacles? Don't know. But is it a lone wolf? Um, Only Richard Allen knows exactly. And I tend to, right now all we have is lone wolf. He's the one that's been convicted for it. But the door was open for him to point the fingers towards others, and he didn't. Mark Ferris says that the big reveal for me is that Richard Allen's voice matches Bridge Guy's voice. Game over. Um, the confessions, like I said, was that the voices similar, of course, um, and probably some of the times when he was talking to his wife most in that lower voice of I'm not capable of that. I wouldn't do that. That's almost the same mannerisms of guys down the hill. And wish that they had played that with him and her in the room together um, to see what those interactions would have been. Might be a sociopath or psycho. Yes, there ain't no might be. He's one. He's one of them. That's my opinion. Yeah, he's one of them. Steve, do you think he was there alone? That's why the scene says, but DNA is annoying me. Yeah, yes, I do believe that he is um, a lone wolf for the fact that if there's multiple offenders, um, the most critical part of starting this crime and gaining control is at the end of that bridge. And we have no indicators that there's more than one individual at the end of that bridge. I've looked at the shadows. We don't hear other voices. We don't see, um, you know, them discussing others other than is he still behind me, or that muttering of words. And so, yeah, I'm along the line that is a single offender. Yeah, if someone showed me a piece of paper that said it was hard evidence, my gun was there, I would have read it 27 times. He didn't read it once. Um, yeah, there's a certain ways of, and I agree with you, that if you tell me I didn't do something, I'm going to tell you that yes, your report's found wrong or it's fabricated. You're lying to me. You're trying to trick me because it's not true. All that is a lie, and you need to get out there and get the offender. Um, Paula said, "What kind of mushrooms?" I don't know what kind of mushrooms, although Richard Allen knows what kind of mushrooms because he said it wasn't in season for him yet. But yeah, that's the only time he carried a firearm. Um, and and so, with that being said, like I said, that was the one of the biggest answers for me that day is that if he picked up that firearm to walk that trail and he passed those girls on a mission, he was on a mission. There was a he was going out there to get someone. He said, "You saw the cop take up for getting the pics right. It was a trap." Now I wasn't really impressed. Um, uh, Now I'm talking about with the DNA. That when the officer came in to get the DNA swabs, um, I kind of got tickled at him for the fact that he gloved up and then he starts handling papers with those gloves before he does the swab. Um, And of course, we saw in the O.J. Simpson that you shouldn't handle other things before your main focus of what you're on and doing to limit the cross contamination. But yeah, necessarily, I can't eliminate the crimes of Logan. It's annoying. I think if Logan had anything to do with it, they would have absolutely charged him with it. Johnny says, "Do you think that they played that recording to Kath Ashton if it sounded like him?" Um, I would I would have absolutely played it with her in the room with him, um, and see what those reactions were. Let's not, and tell Richard that this is what happened here. You know, let's see what he says. Hello, Lynn. Necessary. I saw multiple officers at the Allen house searching, handling evidence with no gloves. Yeah, it happens, but some of that evidence, closed closet, of course, you don't want to contaminate, you don't want to cross contaminate, and it's poor procedures for the fact that you want that jury to have the utmost confidence in the even the most simple of things that these jurors see law enforcement under the eyes that they expect what they see on CSI to be true, that we have true professionals handling things. And so it builds that reputation of an expectation that law enforcement is doing everything by the book, even if they're gathering something that has limited possibilities as far as being involved in the crime. Yeah, there's a lot of things that could have been done a little bit different. Paul says, I only believe the boondocks and personal protections reasons. The fishing, the mushroom hunting sounds like, um, sorry for the pun, but a fishy story. Um, yeah, and I'm almost positive when he said that he rarely carries it. I don't think he ever carried it again after um, that encounter with Abby and Olivia, and after um, on Valentine's Day. I think that's the last day he ever carried that firearm. Couldn't be afforded if the law enforcement's looking for a 40 cal. If he knew about that bullet, if he didn't know about the bullet, he carried it. But if he knew that he had lost a bullet, um, you know, um, as far as in law enforcement, I knew exactly how many bullets I had at me on me at any one moment in time, and because magazines are full and you got one in the chamber. Um, and he said he generally carried that firearm with one in the chamber. Generally means not always. And so there are the opportunities um, for that would allow him to make the mistake of having not remembering if there's one in the chamber or not, and functioning racking the firearm. Um, there's no, you asked me if I keep mine with one in the chamber. It's not generally, it is always. I keep one in the chamber. It's just part of my life. Tobe did that interview with a single 40 cal sitting on his desk. Yes, he did. And now that we know what we know now, there was significance with that, and it was staging. And like I said, law enforcement does a lot of things for a lot of reasons. And and that was picked up on by some people, and we can look back at it and say, good catch. All righty, guys. But anyway, I got a lot of work that we've done. Got the year kicked off. Been out there working. Got some more stuff going on as far as some of the cases. Looking forward to this year. And uh, so I appreciate everything that y'all do for us. And y'all stay safe out there. And we'll see you guys soon. Bye bye, guys.